So, for today's walk with me, I wanted to talk about the fact that forgiveness is actually a selfish act, and that is why I do it. And when I say selfish, of course, that has kind of a negative connotation, but I mean it as something positive. It's something that we do for us, not the other person. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is because a friend was talking to me about their parents and just talking about some of the things, some anger and frustration was coming up, and just some resentment. And I was mentioning that, sometimes it's important to actually forgive and move on. And that person was just very, very against it. And I get it. I know that sometimes it's really hard to forgive. But I just wanted to talk about this concept of the fact that when we forgive, we're actually doing it for ourselves. And because the person was like, yeah, but if I forgive, it's almost like I'm giving them a free pass and I'm saying that what they did is okay. And this person is somebody who's very close to me, and I know their parents, and I know, a little bit of the story also. And believe me, like, I don't think their parents are bad per se, but I don't think that they were very good parents. And I think that actually they were very self centered. I don't think they gave my friend a lot of love growing up, a lot of like confidence, and kind of like being able to trust other people. And those are huge. But anyway, I still think, even if there are some pretty bad things that happen, forgiveness is such a power move when we can do it. Because again, forgiveness is not about telling somebody that whatever they've done is good, or it's not actually about finding any fairness in a situation, about proving who's right, who's wrong. It's actually about cutting bonds with the people who have hurt you. And it's one of those things, like, sometimes we think that when we hold on to grudges or kind of like a resentment, it's almost like we're going to be punishing the other people. Like, well, at least they, if ever they know how, how much they hurt us, then they'll really feel sorry and they'll feel bad, and they actually will feel bad that we don't like them. It's almost like we're trying to punish them. But in the end, actually, what's funny is, I'm sure you've already had this too in your life. When you actually try and talk to somebody, let's say, who you feel owes you an apology, um, those people, first of all, never think about you, never think about what they've done. They don't actually even, they might not even understand how it was hurtful. And I know in my case, sometimes I've actually tried to tell people who I thought at the time they owed me an apology, but I, tried to explain and tried to get that apology, so that I could forgive them. But, in the end, I could talk, it was almost as if I was talking into this huge void. It didn't matter what I said. They still didn't understand. And so, holding on to that grudge and that frustration doesn't harm them. They don't care. They don't feel it. They will not feel your anger and frustration. The anger that you feel is only for yourself. And so by not forgiving and by not cutting that bond with them, actually, it's like we're giving them power to have our inner world. Also, that funny thing is, like, even when somebody apologizes, sometimes you still can't forgive. So forgiveness is not about the apology. It's not about having them understand what they have actually done or trying to prove your point. So what is forgiveness? Forgiveness is actually, forgiveness is when you finally decide that you no longer want to have a bond with the person that has hurt you. And I remember when I first read about this, I was like, I totally understood the concept. It's like, basically, as I said, forgiveness is only for yourself. It's not actually for the other person. But I remember when I read it, I was like, okay, hell yeah, yeah, let me go. I want to forgive. I want to stop having these bonds. I want to, like, just be able to move on, and no longer have them be in my life. Because when we don't forgive, basically, that person still has some kind of power on us. And I remember, though, at the time, like, trying this, on other people, and in the end, you can't force forgiveness. Unfortunately, it does come with time, but it also comes with intention. I'll get into that a bit later. But I do know when I was thinking about the whole forgiveness thing, I do remember thinking about how I was thinking back on some people that I have forgiven in my past, kind of to see like, well, what did happen there? And I remember, for example, one person who had really hurt me when I was in high school, and it was my gymnastics coach. And the funny thing is, for this story, I was trying to remember what she had done so I could talk about it, but I can't remember. But all that to say is that I know she hurt me really bad, because about 2 years after she hurt me, I still was holding on to those resentments and grudges, and I still wanted to, like, get her to apologize, or get her to understand, or get her to see my side. So I know I wanted to write her a letter. That I remember. So I remember that 2 years after whatever happened, I still felt that kind of anger and frustration. Fast forward to now, first of all, as I just mentioned, I can't even remember what she said or did or whatever. I remember it had to do with, like, it wasn't just a one-off thing. It was maybe the way she was treating me compared to the other people, but still, I can't even remember. And what I do know, though, is that I feel very neutral compared to her. I don't think about her. Like, neutral means I don't have good or bad. Like, when I think back on that situation, I don't actually feel anything. I just feel neutral. And so to me, that is a good indication of what it feels like when you have forgiven, because I have forgiven her. I don't even know what I had to forgive her for, but I don't think about it, and there is no more bond between me and this person. On the other hand, there are other people in my life that, I have a harder time forgiving, and that, as much as I would like to, sometimes it's really difficult. And as I mentioned, after reading the podcast and listening to books, listening to the books and reading the books and listening to podcasts, I wanted to forgive, but it wasn't always easy. And for example, I have this one person in my life that I would really like to forgive, because I don't want that bond anymore. I don't want that to be like in my life. I don't want to have that person have any power over me. And as much as I have tried sometimes in the past, and I've done things like, ceremonies where you cut the bonds and things, sometimes that person still pops up. That being said, that is something about forgiveness that's important to remember, is that it happens in waves and in layers. So with this person, for example, there are days that I have gotten to the point where I am able to forgive them, and where I think about the fact that if I were to meet them in the street, I would even feel kind of like, tenderness towards them, and thinking that, I would say, okay, I know you hurt me. Maybe you didn't even know. Maybe you had no idea. Maybe you were doing your best. Maybe you did have an idea, but you didn't know what to do with it. I feel like I would have a lot of compassion, almost even, for the person. And then there are other days where I wake up and that person has, grated on my nerves for some reason, or something came up in my life that made me think about this again. And I definitely don't feel the forgiveness. And I definitely feel like proving to them and telling them why they were wrong and how they hurt me, and like demand an apology. But again, even if the person is to apologize, the forgiveness comes from within. Like, some people apologize and you say you forgive them, but have you really? The forgiveness is something else. The forgiveness is something that comes with time. As I said, it comes with layers. Also, the important thing to remember about forgiveness is that when we can't forgive, everything that I read and heard about forgiveness is that that's okay. You can't force forgiveness. If you try to force forgiveness, it's like spiritually bypassing whatever you're going through. You need to go through some of those ideas, those pains, those emotions. But what you can do, and I think this is the thing that's always helped me, is that you can intend to forgive. And that intending to forgive is just as good or as valid as forgiveness, in the sense that, sure, you're not there yet. You haven't completely forgiven, but you have the intention, and that in itself is very strong. And so, yeah, I think that's what I wanted to talk about today on this walk with me, is just to remind you that if you're in the process of forgiving, or you're having a hard time forgiving, first of all, intend to forgive. That is the starting point. you can't forgive if you still want to hold on to the anger. I'm not saying that you're going to get rid of the anger might still be there, but if you intend to forgive, if you intend to be free, then you will eventually get there. The other thing is I wanted to mention is, trust and patience. Remember that forgiveness actually takes time. It takes your whole body, your you need to release that bond. You need to release the kind of like feelings that are attached to it. You might need to process some of those emotions, and that's okay. So just to be patient with yourself. And then lastly, just to also remember to forgive yourself. I think that is one of the main things too in forgiveness, is that when we are angry and frustrated at other people, we tend to also start blaming ourselves. We start to get angry at ourselves. And I think that one of the steps in forgiving others is also to remember to forgive ourselves. Forgive ourselves for whatever we might have done in the situation. Forgive ourselves for not being able to forgive. Just be able to go through that. So on that, I'm wishing you lots of love and lots of laughter as you move through forgiveness, as you move through your waves of forgiveness, as you're able to forgive and hopefully get into that neutral state, that moment where you just know that like there is no more bond holding you connected to that person. Remember that you're doing it for yourself. Remember that you're allowed to want to be free, and that if you hold on to things, it's actually just making them have power over you and your inner world. So on that, wishing you lots of love, lots of laughter, and I will see you next video. Thanks so much for watching.